Hello, this is this is quite the evening, I think. I'm not sure what time it is actually, but this is this is Backyard and Reads, and I am going to talk about my review of The Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Let me first just say that this specific book series has had a lot said on it, and while I do enjoy this book, I actually prefer the Carcanis trilogy, which is not actually a trilogy yet, because the third book has yet to come out, and I really hope I get to read that book, because man, I remember really enjoying Forge of Darkness and The Fall of Light. And however, with The Fall of Light, I haven't really completed it yet. I actually moved before I could finish it, and I was only halfway through, and I just completely forgot about it. But I remember reading those books. They were very interesting. They had this sort of poetic feel to them. Maximal, and like kind of throws you in the deep end. Like with the Carcanis trilogy, it's set like thousands and thousands of years before the actual Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's a very interesting sort of book series. Like it's from what few books I've read, and I read this one not too long ago, and it's a very good book. Because it delves into this sort of almost fallen empire, and it has this very fantastic sort of world to it. A world that, if it was ever to be adapted, I don't think could ever truly work in live action. Like, I think it would work very badly in live action, especially if Wheel of Time is the adaptation for Wheel of Time is anything to go for, which, if you read through that, there's some really fantastic bits later on in the books that are really massive and really cool to read through or listen to, but really doesn't quite work well in how cheap of an adaptation that it's going to be by Amazon, which is really quite the shame. But I think I'll put that as another time. But I know that one thing that's very interesting about the book, at least with this, is that it does have this sort of it feels like a very complete. It feels like a lot of implications of the world, and it has this interesting sort of magic. It's got some interesting characters in it and some interesting concepts. Like it's very high fantasy. It doesn't really hold your hand through it, which is very maximal writing, and that can be very off-putting for people who are especially getting into reading for the first time. Because when you're getting into reading for the first time, you don't want to get into something so difficult that it goes like, I have no fucking clue what to do. And you have to keep that in mind. Now, I'm a weirdo, self-proclaimed, because, well, for the reason that I actually started this sort of world of the Malazan Book of the Fallen from the Forge of Darkness, which, if you've read Forge of Darkness, you would go like, yeah, that's very wordy sort of book, and there's lots of things in it that are very different. And I remember like reading through the Carcanis trilogy, or at least Forge of Darkness. There were bits where I was just like, oh my god, and it's like really well written, and it gets you invested in the characters, and like when you feel the deaths, you're just like, fuck, wow, holy shit, oh my god. And I think that's one really big strength of Steven Erikson and his books, or at least the few that I've read, right? Because I remember that I talked to one guy about it, and he said that one of his complaints, like one thing is it's like, oh, like with every couple books, there's like, oh, there's this one guy that's really powerful, and then, oh, there's this other guy that's really, really powerful, almost, and it sounds almost Dragon Ball-esque. To be fair, I haven't read through the other books. I only read Guardians of the Moon and the few bits of the Carcanis trilogy. But from what I can definitely say is that it's well worth a read for anyone to do. But again, not a first read, because it doesn't hold your hand. You have to really put in effort to kind of keep track of things, figure things out. It really trusts the reader to understand what's going on, and it really trusts that. And I really appreciate that with that sort of books, because too often do I feel like, oh, I don't want to be seen as this kind of incompetent idiot that can barely read, right? Because I enjoy reading, though to be fair, I didn't read that often until like some years ago. However, it's because of those some years ago that I became into the books in general, and I would say that while I love like the A Song of Ice and Fire books, really well done books, but if I was to choose between them, I would choose anything Malazan, because it's got this extra layer of this weird sort of magic and world and all that. Because one thing is that I was very into like Morrowind when I had it, and if you know anything about Morrowind, it has this weird, fantastical sort of world. Okay, the cat's behind me. And there's some really fantastical bits of like the world through the Carcanis trilogy, of like this grey sea that like devours the land and just like eats away at the things, and there's like all these sorts of interesting sorts of magics and things, and it feels very mythological at times. Not nearly as mythological as, say, Lord of the Rings, or rather the Silmarillion. It feels very well realized, like a very well realized world. Like this world, they have like lots of this magic that can be very horrific and horrible, and it's just like really changes people and just like mutates them and all these horrible things, right? It can be something that's just like horrific, because let's be real, magic would be horrific in like the ways if it was real. Like if people could actually conjure things like fireball or just shoot lightning from their fingertips, just from those things alone, that would be horrific because of all the potential damage it can do. And like one of the opening bits, one of the first few chapters is like this horrific thing of this guy being melted apart, and it's really it's like really cool, really fucking interesting, and like I really want to read more of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but I don't really have the money, but I do hope to get some more, to read some more, because I really love this, and it has like a lot of interesting sorts of characters, and it really bounces back between like assassins and these bridge burners, these agents of the Empress, this Empress who is probably definitely corrupt from what little I understand. She is she's like ruling through fear and violence and all that. And if you know anything about history, you would realize that fear and violence, the threat of fear and violence can only work for so long until people just have enough. And from understanding that and considering his background in, was it anthropology? Considering his, or was it archaeology? I think it's archaeology. Yeah, I think it's archaeology. But considering his background, it would make a lot of sense that there would be a lot of history that is kind of reinterpreted into this. It's a very good read, and I would recommend anyone read Gardens of the Moon, but more so I would recommend the Forge of Darkness and the Fall of Light, for the reason that it has this different sort of feel to it. Like, it feels a bit more poetic in a way versus something like this. And that's my review, and yeah.